Let me just thank you all for being here. We appreciate it very, very much. You know from past discussions that Minnesota faces some great challenges and some great opportunities with respect to our education system and the preparation of our children's children's education moving forward. Let me start with the good news, and the good news is that we have a state that has historically led the charge when it comes to education reform and improvement. Minnesota was the first state in the nation with open enrollment. Minnesota was the first state in the nation with charter schools. Minnesota was the first state in the nation with post-secondary enrollment options. And has always been on the leading edge of education reform and improvement, trying new things, trying new ideas. And it's in that spirit that we want Minnesota to continue to lead, not just in terms of education results, but also seeing the future, embracing the future, and in deploying those activities that are going to improve our students' education even further. There's a race going on, and it's conveniently labeled Race to the Top. And President Obama and Secretary Duncan have done a good job at crystallizing many, not all, but many of the reforms that individuals and groups across the country have studied, have debated, have talked about for these last many years and decades. And they've crystallized many of those needed reforms into the criteria in the application for Race to the Top. And of course, this is the program where the federal government is offering some competitive grant money to states who are willing to line up with these criteria for reform in the country. They had round one. Minnesota applied. We came in 20th in the nation on the application. And there are some things that the reviewers, the evaluators who are nonpartisan gave us high marks for, and there are some things they gave us low marks for. The things that they gave us high marks for include the commitment that the state of Minnesota and our policymakers have had to charter schools. By the way, we were recently recognized as the #1 state in the nation for charter schools by the National Association of Charter Schools. We also get strong marks for our improved standards and assessment. You might recall some years ago we threw out the profiles of learning, which weren't viewed as very rigorous or robust and kind of meandering in nature, and developed some more rigorous standards. Those have been put into place and were recognized in this application and elsewhere as having good, strong standards in Minnesota. Positive comments were made about our QComp program, which is a first in the nation, at least in terms of a statewide application of moving school employees, particularly teachers, from a seniority pay system more towards a performance pay system. We also got high marks for our commitment to science, technology, and engineering and math curriculum and standards and programming. Of course, that acronym for that is STEM, and a few other things. But since then, we've learned about the deficiencies in Minnesota's commitment to education reform, and we want to make sure that we hear what they are, see what they are, and move towards not just competing for the money, the federal money that's available, but these are changes that need to be made anyhow in terms of improving education in the state of Minnesota and beyond. So the announcement today is this. We met last week with the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the Senate in this room, as well as the leaders of the chairs for education policy in Minnesota. They were open to trying to pursue or at least consider some of these things. So they asked our commissioner and our administration to put them into bill form and to present them for consideration to the legislature. So today we're making available that bill in one document, a comprehensive form. These are not new issues in the sense that many of them have been proposed before, discussed before, and in most cases set aside before by the current legislature. But we believe that given the competition that we're in, the advance of the research and the consensus around these types of things being needed for education reform and improvement in our country, that they are worthy of reconsideration. Let me just start by acknowledging that one of the categories that's quite important is the teacher quality and effectiveness. You've heard me say many times before that the #1 determining factor of how a child's going to do in the school is the degree of engagement and activity by their parents. But the second most important determining factor of how a child's going to do in school is the quality and effectiveness and preparedness of their teachers. There has been, again, a great deal of research and study around the country on these issues. There's the need to have a more robust recruitment system for higher quality people coming into teaching, more robust and rigorous colleges of education, higher entrance requirements for colleges of education, higher exit requirements for colleges of education, more robust professional development once you leave the college, are all very, very important, and the themes listed underneath that are part of the bill that we're presenting today. The second is alternative pathways to teaching. The notion here is that there are people either at the front end of their career or maybe their mid-career who have a particular skill set, an area of expertise that might be in relative shortage. They otherwise have a different career path. They might have gone through and gotten their master's or PhD, say, in engineering, and at least for a while they might be willing to serve as a teacher in our schools. And these are typically very skilled, very highly educated, very competent, qualified people who are discouraged from considering teaching as a second career or maybe an initial career because they would have to go back and restart a very long process to enter teaching. Third, tiered licensure for teachers and principals is in this bill. In this case, you'd have one level of license for new entrants into the teaching profession. You'd have a second level of license for the folks who've been there a little while, called a standard license, and then you'd have an enhanced or master's level license for those who have an exceptional result and an exceptional set of credentials and experiences. The next one relates to statewide teacher and principal evaluations. In Minnesota and in many other states around the country, evaluations have been a hodgepodge. Some districts do it really well, some don't. Some have standardized, rigorous, robust, specific criteria, some don't. Some do it quite frequently, some don't. The training and support that follows on to these evaluations is sometimes good, sometimes it isn't. And so the need to have a minimum quality standard around teacher evaluation and having a system that's tied to what we mean by effective teaching, so all of these things are aligned, is very important, and the bill speaks to that as well. And then lastly, or second to lastly, we have professional development and continuing tenure for teachers and principals. You're seeing in Florida, you're seeing in Delaware, you're seeing in many other states that are more aggressive on education reform, changing the length and nature of tenure. Teachers historically have received a tenure designation in part because they wanted to be more insulated from various forces, but you're now seeing the notion that somebody gets tenure for a lifetime being adjusted in many other states to say, no, we're going to relook at that every so often. We called for in the state of the state earlier this year, and I think in previous years, that tenure be renewed at least every once in a while. So on our most recent call for tenure reform in Minnesota, it was at least every 5 years. We don't think that's too much to ask, and I think that's appropriate, particularly in light of the fact that other states are being more aggressive and passing us by on these things. Authority to intervene in low-performing schools. Minnesota has the ability for our Commissioner of Education to intervene in low-performing districts, but it's unlikely that a district as a whole is a chronically underperforming district. We don't usually experience that, but it's not unlikely for certain sites or schools to be chronically underperforming. And so the race to the top is saying if you want to compete, you have to have a mechanism to intervene boldly and aggressively in chronically underperforming schools. And then lastly, allow successful charter schools to expand in Minnesota more robustly. In Minnesota, we have these wonderful organizations, for example, KIPP schools. But if they want a charter expansion in Minnesota, each school has to be separately chartered. Each school has to have its separate legal platform and board of directors. We believe that once an organization is approved to be a charter, an organization that runs charter schools, you shouldn't have to go through the process every time you want to open up one more school when the organization itself has already been proven, its credentials, proven its muster, proven its ability to do these things.